Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. I always want to say 24/7, but we take your questions in 24/7, but we answer them just once a day. And that's in the morning. You're here right now. 7 o'clock in the morning is when we do this Pacific Standard Time. But you can ask those questions in Mokana that morning or a little bit before. And you can ask the questions. You can vote on the questions. You can talk about the questions there. Now, if you're not in Mokana, don't worry about it. If you do want to get into there, you can go to go to officehours.global/join, sign up for the newsletter and those links to Discord and links to Mokana and all those other fun things. If you're not there, you can join just by asking. Just go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. You can ask those questions 24/7. So you throw those into there, and then we file them all in the next morning. So askofficehours.global, and sometimes we get to them on the same day. Most of the time, it's the next day. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Alex, what do we have?
First question this morning is from Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. How did CNN do with the technical audio and video aspects of last night's debate?
Go ahead, Jesse.
It didn't look like a particularly challenging broadcast, but in focus, no audio clipping and no over-excessive compression. Technically, fine.
Go ahead, Jonas.
I think they did okay. What was interesting, I was watching the feed on YouTube and one of the rebroadcasts, and they did horribly at A, re-encoding it, and B, how they did the opt-ins and opt-outs. Like, as soon as you heard we're going to go to a break, they first cut to their version of like advertising, but not really, because they couldn't show it. So like, as soon as the actual ads started playing, they cut to a replay of random moments without letting anyone know that it's a replay. So like, I kept like looking over to it and be like, didn't I just hear that? I found the mic muting was done pretty well. There were two moments where they weren't so strict with the rules, where they like allowed for a sentence to get through again. Whoever did that did a really good job at the mic mutes. What I found a little confusing is they didn't have timers. They used timing lights instead of timers for the candidates. So there were yellow lights if they had like 30 seconds left, the red blinking light if they had 5 seconds left. Yeah, overall, I think the production was pretty okay.
Yeah, productions are much easier when you get rid of the audience, so which I'm a big fan of, by the way. I think that this is the way that they should do these debates. So I think that from a technical perspective and a I think that it was better than most, in my opinion, just because I find that having the audiences in these debates is just trash. It completely screws up the event. It makes all the audio so much worse. I don't think it really adds anything to it. I think I think that I'm a big fan of the direction that this went. I think that the challenge with the encoding was, I believe that was a LED wall behind them. And even if you can't see the LED walls behind someone, it really affects the compression. So it will defeat the temporal compression inside of the system. And what's interesting is, if you watch it now, it may not look as bad. It's the live encoding that is really dependent on that temporal compression working well. And if the LED wall has any texture at all, and that usually means if you want to be able to see the logo, the CNN logo behind them, they have to keep it enough in focus so that you can see those logos. And as soon as you do that, you're going to pay the price. And so the step and repeat that they put behind them is part of the problem. And it's a step and repeat given that the LED wall is probably why there was a lot of compression problems. So I would say, on a technical perspective, that's the one fail in the process. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, behind the scenes there, in one of the Facebook groups, there's a technical director one, and the technical director put up some behind the scenes. I was wondering if anybody could say what that switcher is that they're utilizing. I know that Jeff's been in a lot of newsrooms.
That looks like a Sony.
Jeff, that's a Sony?
That looks like a Sony.
And then the cameras, it says MCS. There was these big old cameras here.
I'm going to guess that the whole thing was a Sony system. Looking at that, right? think that's one of the Sony broadcast cameras. So that's just the lens, and
that's the vendor.
Sony body.
Yeah.
MCS is
Gotcha.
the vendor.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
I
just one
see
of those.
the Sony badge there. So it is a Sony camera with a DigiPower, so a Fujinon Digi55 on a Sony.
Yep.
And then you can see the LED wall back there. And the lighting.
Yeah, and so I think that the LED
audience.
wall is what technically screwed up the stream. It won't affect the broadcast as much, but it really affects anywhere that needs to go into compression. so it's they are, LED walls are kind of the death of making this work. You can make it work. It's just that the LED wall can't curve, so it has to be flat. And I don't know if that one was curved or not, but to get to 0.9 mil, and you really have to be below 1.5 mil to get to a point where you're not affecting compression. Now you can get a little higher than that, and depending on your depth of field and everything else, get past the moire issue that LEDs provide. But to get to where it's not affecting your compression, you really have to be under 1.5. Next question.
From the QR code, Marielle, Jusha, Miera, and Wablo asks, is Blackmagic Design's 2110 gear ready for primetime yet, or is it too early?
Jonas?
I would say just not yet. And the reasoning is not specifically that there's still software missing, but 2110 really lives from the interoperability, and we just don't know how that is going to go with Blackmagic yet. There's still a couple software updates that they have been talking about at NAB that we're waiting for. I think if you use a closed ecosystem loop with Blackmagic, you would probably be fine. As soon as you vendor out into the other 2110 stuff, you probably will have a hard time. What you'll find is that most 2110 that I've seen deployed in trucks is deployed by NEP, of course, and other truck companies. But most of the time, they actually need to build their own systems, have a lot of conversations between the vendors and be like, but Sony is saying this is how you send the SDP, and Grass Valley is only accepting it if you send it this way, and this is how the routing works, and this is why you can't route that source. So I don't think 2110 in general is ready for prime time yet, or the mainstream, if you say so, just because it is not for the mainstream yet. But I mean, it is used on prime time all of the time now. I know that a lot of facilities are now on 2110 as well. But Blackmagic stuff, I think, still needs a little work and especially experience.
Jeff?
I think the big question is, what problem are you trying to solve? Is 2110 or do you want to just embrace it because it's the newest, latest, greatest thing that's rolled out?
Well, I think there's a lot of convenience to it. I mean, in the same way that there's convenience with NDI. If you're a Blackmagic user and you want to use Ethernet, it's pretty useful outline.
But
pipeline.
all the other infrastructure is what's being glazed over. All the other infrastructure that has to be taken in place. I
mean, I can say as my system now is much more heterogeneous, but with Pixel Core, I was almost a closed system with Blackmagic, and I think that people who are non-Blackmagic don't really see that, but you get into a position where you just buy stuff because it's all part of the ecosystem, and you don't have to think about that anymore. And so you build stacks and stacks and stacks of stuff that's Blackmagic only. And so I think that that's a pretty, for their market, again, whether that works for everybody, maybe not, but it's a big place, and they seem to have a really big booth. So whatever they're doing seems to work for them. But a lot of times their components are not being used by themselves. They're being, you're building a rack of these. I do think I agree with Jeff in the sense that if you expect, and Jonas, if you expect to connect this with anything else, it's not going to work. You're going to need converters and everything else. If you're a Blackmagic user that uses Blackmagic stuff and you want to build what I would say is a small kit that was flexible that you can go do some corporate events with, I think this, maybe you could get into it, but I would consider it experimental. Like I don't think it's, I wouldn't jump into it just yet either. So I think all of us are like a little leery of hopping right into it. I'd love to test it. I'd love to use it on but if I was doing a small 3 or 4 camera shoot, and now I can just have Ethernet and I can just plug them in and I have some routing and so on and so forth. I built lots of small kits that are, when I say small, I mean sub $80,000 kits that I can throw together that are all going to be Blackmagic, and the sound might be a little different. And those are the kind of kits that I might build this into. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, I was watching a local breaking news broadcast and the caption, Dejero Output 1 was briefly displayed as they cut to the live shot from a helicopter. How does Dejero compare to LiveU, and how well does bonded cellular work from the air?
Bonded cellular can work fairly well in the air. If it gets too high, it stops working. But you're in a pretty good situation oftentimes because of the way that you don't have anything in between you and the transmitter in the transponders. So if you get too high, they're not really designed for that, and so you will have trouble with your cellular. So but if something at a height that is covering news on the ground, you're probably going to get pretty good cellular. I used to lease both a Dejero and a LiveU at the same time, and I can tell you that the LiveU is dramatically better than the Dejero. At least when I tested it or when I used it, I put the Dejero. The Dejero had a different form factor; it was slightly smaller, and so we would use it in specific cases, and we just had enough trouble with it that we stopped using it. So that was and so we thought, and then we rented it a couple times because it was less expensive than the LiveU, but failure is the most expensive part of a project. So we were fortunate that it was a backup to a satellite truck that didn't go down, but it was enough. It broke up enough that we stopped using the Dejeros. Next question.
From the QR code, Kevin Young in Everett, Washington asks, my second question is, if I send tone from the Midas M32, what tools should I use to monitor that audio for the purpose of calibrating?
And I think that this is, we voted them separately. As you're watching this, the best thing to do for questions is always assume the question stands by itself, because this is the first question instead of the second question. And for our QA folks, we'll see if we can edit that stuff out. Yeah, go ahead, Jonas.
So what I'll say is, you probably want to do this for gain staging purposes. So what you want to do is take the input, and then I normally build myself a little diagram of what stages is my signal going to, like going into your audio interface. Then you want to check the audio levels on the audio meters of your audio interface. Then you, let's say, put it into vMix. Let's look at those levels in vMix again and make sure it's the right thing. And that whole gain staging process is what I would walk through. And then in the end, what we also do is we do a full pipeline test and send it to YouTube. And then we use Uline audio meters. They're cheap or free. And you can use them. And the cool thing is you can set them to pull your PC audio. So we just have a feed for our producers that is Uline audio meters with the output from YouTube that we're pulling in again. That way we know the end delivery and where that is. So I would walk through your pipeline, check it in every stage, and then do a full pipeline test with something like Uline or WLM meters at the end, and check that you still get the loudness that you would expect based on the loudness that the volume you set your tone at.
Good guy.
Yeah, welcome to the show, Kevin. He's actually locally. I've been to his house, so cool to see him posting in here. So to answer the question, I know that he's referring back to Jeff Francis's session with the ATEM Mini in particular, and so you got to be aware that that device has 3.5 millimeter inputs, and so I would stick, and it's expecting a line level that's not traditional professional line level. It's expecting consumer line level. So we stick an Art CleanBox Pro in front of it. So if you're using an M32, you know that that's guaranteed negative 20 dB tone if you send it out. So knowing that and using an Art CleanBox Pro, you can then monitor in the ATEM Mini software. You can see exactly what, if you rewind back that show where Jeff shows it, it's the second episode. You could see as he adjusts it up and down that you can solo, and you could do some pre-fade listens and using the headphone jack if you have an ATEM Mini Pro or ISO and not the regular Mini. And hope that helps.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, that's all good advice. And of course, you do definitely want some kind of meter that will also give you, in addition to the average perceived levels like LUFS, but also a true peak meter. Because things like your ATEM, for example, they're not going to report those overshoots that can happen. Now, the other thing you're going to want to do is also have a way to monitor the audio through the entire chain with headphones or speakers or whatever, but you're going to want to actually hear. I usually use headphones. You want to hear how that audio is being processed from start to finish. So for example, in my setup, I have a digital mixer, but there's various gain stages, and I've got outputs of a digital mixer that go into the camera, and then that camera comes in HDMI into my switcher. So there's audio going into my switcher, which live streams. But I also want to hear what the audience is hearing. So in addition to using the solo bus on my digital mixer to hear how the processing is going out into the live stream, what I also do is I actually have a little inexpensive monitor controller. Now, Art, which is a company we just mentioned that makes that clean box product, they make a product called the Studio Control Center, SCC, and it's an inexpensive monitor controller. So what I do is anything I need to monitor goes through that, and I can switch between all those inputs and outputs. So I have the headphone jack of the ATEM, and even the headphone jack of my camera is actually routed into this monitor controller. So I can actually hear how it's coming through the other end. And that's one step that a lot of people miss is what is the audience actually hearing on the other end? And you want to stick your LUFF's meter on at the end of the chain as well, so you can hear what are the levels that are actually going out to the live stream if you're actually live streaming.
Yeah, and it depends on, so a couple of things from Mickey suggests a VU or a peak meter, and there's a variety of different meters that are out there that you can read. I don't know. Mickey can tell me whether he likes. We've been looking at the TC Electronic stuff that, and I don't know whether those are valuable or not. But we've been looking at them specifically for 5.1 to look at what we're doing here. Mickey says they're okay. So Craig Kadoki mentioned this NTI. This is probably the heavy lift here, but this NTI Minilizer, the ML1. Now this is about $1,000. So, but it has a lot of features that are in there that look pretty amazing. So there's a more hardware view, and the question also is what is it coming out to, and what is it going into as far as Mickey says not to calibrate using loudness meter like WLM or ULIN, measure actual electrical or digital levels. I will say that what we do oftentimes, or what I do oftentimes, is I have, if it's going to be embedded into an SDI signal, at that point, what I want to know is what's on my SDI signal, and it's that is at that point encoded. So now there can be things that happen before that, but I'm trying to figure out what's actually going to go into my encoder. And at that point, I am usually digitizing that into a piece of software. So I'm typically looking at Spectre on a Mac, or that's the most typical one because it's old and rickety and still has the most detail that I can possibly get. So Spectre is the one that I use. I haven't found another digital meter, and we've been using that as a way to look at it. And a lot of times, what happens is that we'll have two Spectres. One that is measuring what's going into the encoder, and one that's measuring what is coming out on the stream, so that we can get a sense of anything that might be happening in between. But that's a very specific use case there. I mean, typically what you're doing is you're working on making sure that the levels are the same between all of your pieces of hardware. Next question.
Next question is from Matt Halverson in Brookings, South Dakota. Our TV show sometimes has a remote Zoom guest that we show on a 42-inch TV. I like the vertical look of screens when it's a single person on it. What's the best way to rotate my Zoom output so my guests can be shown vertically?
Jason?
I would use Zoom with dual monitors, and if you have your guest go into the Zoom settings, they will see this little rotate piece. And if you have that little rotate piece and then you go to full screen on your second monitor, it should be a piece of cake.
Good guy.
Yeah, if you're using a hardware switcher like an ATEM, it's in there. You could do it with a flying key. You could also do it with vMix or something like that. You could spin stuff around. So vMix is what I use, and that's what you're seeing me push that little button. It's in the position section of vMix.
You will never get the right resolution with that. Just, it's still limited to the vertical resolution that you had. So you're going to be there's going to be some kind of scale up that's required. I mean, we had a lot of problem with this. We're working with a company that does a lot of vertical video, and it's not, obviously you're getting, just remember that you're always getting from Zoom a 1080p, a 1080 signal at best, 1080 high, and you're going to put it onto a monitor that wants to do 1920. So it's not going to be the same there.
Yeah, they did this at Zoomtopia where they just turned the monitor on the side and then they turned the camera on the side as well. So then the people coming in, it's full resolution, 1920 by 1080. There's no cropping, no scaling. It's dead
So you're not,
it's the
and
full
so
real
you're
deal.
so it's a 1-to-1. So you're not using it in
Yeah.
Zoom, because otherwise you'd have people sideways.
You're
in
using
Zoom.
it in Zoom, yeah. So, but then you're rotating the monitor to have the discussion.
Okay.
So everybody would have to do it, or you would,
Yeah, it's super weird.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's
answers the question, though.
It does answer the question. Okay. Okay. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas asks, what kind of production technology do you expect to see at the Paris Olympics?
Go ahead, Jonas.
I think you're going to see a lot of 5G being used. One of the big differences of this year is if you look at the opening ceremony, it's not going to be a stadium where they're going to do coverage. It's along the Seine River, and it's going to be a long stretch to cover. There's hundreds of cameras. There's phones that are being used. And if you go on LinkedIn, you already see all the vendors bragging about what they're doing. I would wait till after the Olympics to ask the question again, because then everybody will know what tech was actually used. If you look at the current press releases, there's a lot of questions also about sustainability and making sure that equipment isn't just bought for the Olympics and then thrown away, but reusability. I think that's going to be a big impact. And one of my favorite things is that we are in Europe, but we are not producing 1080i 50. It is 1080p. So
It is 1080p.
it is.
Oh, amazing. Go ahead, Jeff.
I think the biggest thing that you're going to see is what you don't see. And like Jonas said, is it'll be after the fact. It'll be after the event. We'll start seeing all this press coming out, or like the first day it'll happen. All this press will come out. It's like, oh, look at us. Look at what we're doing. But from the pre-stuff that I know of, and a few of my friends that are actually working on it, that are doing production there, it's massive amount of remote production. A massive amount. That's going to be the biggest change this year. Not so much the tech on the ground or at the Olympics, but the amount of tech that's being used to bring all those signals back and mix it all back at home, as they would call it. That's just amazing. And again, to the sustainability part, you're not having to roll out so many trucks. You're not having to roll out so many, mock-up MCRs, PCRs that are on site anymore. So it's a big game changer. Again, it has been growing.
And in one of the technologies, you can there are big screens around the United States called IMAX, and they will be having the opening ceremony. So keep your eye out for the sales of those tickets. They may already be on sale, and they're going to be on the big screen. I think that was announced about a month ago. So if you want to go see it, that's one way to see the technology working. Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin asks, I have to create some test clips with some kind of movement in very odd resolutions. What would be an easy way to achieve this? I have no experience in that realm so far.
Jonas?
I use GStreamer or FFmpeg to generate test patterns. You can use an AI like ChatGPT or Claude AI. It will probably scoot out the correct-ish commands to do that. That's how we generate test patterns for 1080i or weird resolutions. That's what I would
1080i being weird. I would call it old, but it is weird.
1080i and weird resolutions.
Oh, got it. Ancient and decrepit and weird and odd resolutions. Yeah. Go ahead, Jesse.
And if you're looking to create the test clips out in the field, we go straight towards moving water for testing pretty much anything about any camera or post workflow that we're working on.
Yeah, my family puts up with the geekiness of, we live near the beach, not too far away, half an hour or so. And anytime we go to one beach, Goat Rock up in Bodega Bay, I almost always bring a camera. At minimum, my iPhone, but usually I have like a Blackmagic 12K because I can capture many different resolutions, and I'm always capturing, to Jesse's point, I'm always capturing the waves. There's a lot of reflection of light as well as the waves, and it makes it extremely hard to encode. And so I record in many different resolutions to test those things. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, one way to do it is, and I think I'm going to steal Jeff's answer here, is to use NDI signal generator on if you have a Mac laying around, and you can do this one called load animation, and in here you could have things like the bouncing line, which would look like that. Whoops, I don't
that
know.
was painful.
Tone in. Sorry about that. So yeah, it comes with audio as well. And then the way that I would be able to get it into a file would be to drag that over NDI. I would drag that as a recorded file into Premiere and make it a growing file, and then I can switch live on the fly and have that stuff as a file as soon as I'm done.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, you stole my thunder. That's one of the good things of the Sienna products that I use it on Linux, but yes, that source generator is what it's known as in the processing engine or signal generator. There is one in there that will break every encoder. It is the hardest thing. It's called color flow. And some of you have probably seen it when we were doing demos and stuff, but it's every pixel, everything moving all at once. And it's the busiest and the hardest thing. That's the one. If anything's going to break, that's the one. That's going to be the test. So that is pushing every bit of bandwidth that you could possibly do. And it just kills encoders, as you can see.
The one that is kind of considered in the work that I do, the industry standard is the SRI, the Sarnoff signals. And these are the Sarnoff signals here. And they're not as rough as the ones that Jeff just showed. But what these visualizers do is there's a lot of patterns going on here, and they tell you a lot. So as you look at them, you can tell whether it's ever gone down to 8-bit, if it's ever had been subsampled, if it's ever been anywhere in the pipeline. So what's useful about these patterns here is that they can let you interrogate the entire pipeline. You can literally put it on, I'm receiving this signal on the other end. I don't need any measurement. I can tell you that, at some point this went to 8-bit, or this was converted to this, or this. And so it's a pretty standard pattern there. It's a little expensive to use, but very powerful. Next question.
From the QR code, Chuck Hodges in Tuolumne, California asks, why choose to leave most of your large customer base behind and excluding them from products you want to get them to engage heavily, Liminal Tech, Zoom tiles, etc., by choosing hardware they may be fully unable to be compatible with?
This is a continuation of discussion. It's probably the last time we'll talk about this for a little while because it's been like all week since our tiles session. But go ahead, Jonas. You can take a crack at it.
I was about to say this probably is the last time because I feel like I've heard that question so many times.
Yeah.
A couple things. Zoom is not excluding their largest customer base. Their largest customer base is not in production. I know this might shock some people. They are not in production.
Yes,
let's get that
exactly.
right. At the same time, Zoom has Unreal Engine on Windows. Zoom Rooms, which is what my whole Zoom remote production equipment and stuff has been built on for over 3 years now. Zoom Rooms works awesome on Windows. Zoom Rooms Pro AV works even better on Windows. You have easy direct outputs of SDI. Did they release tiles only for macOS? Yeah. You know why? Because the encoding and the different needing to build that whole layout. That's a little easier in macOS. But if you mind this much, grab yourself a Zoom Room, grab yourself OBS, output all the NDI feeds up to 16 at 160p. Orient them all in OBS you like. You will pay a little more. You'll have exactly the same. And you can even output it over a decklink card. But I don't think it is fair to say that they are not supporting where people are. And macOS is in the production world, especially on site and for like media and the less people that want to tinker less with their equipment. This is very common choice. Like, yes, all of us who love to tinker with our software. Most of us probably end up doing something weird on Windows or Linux, and you tinker with it, and you break it, and you build it up again. If you want something really simple like tiles, where you point it at something, pulls all the people out, builds a nice layout, they'll probably be on macOS. So I Yeah, I really don't understand.
And there's, I mean, Zoom has 50 products, and there's like 2 or 3 that are Mac only. Like, you know, so like that, like it's really. I know that the reason I wanted to go ahead and run this question is because I just really wanted to make sure we just said that it was very clear. And again, the Liminal team really came from a Windows side. If they thought that they could do it better on Windows, they would. You know, and so, but you know, you don't want to keep slowing down development, saying we have to be able to develop for both platforms all the time. That really slows down innovation. And so being able to figure out what it wants to be means that it can be something, you know, it doesn't mean it'll never be on the PC. You just have to figure out what that, you know, what it's looking at in the place that is the easiest to do it. So I'm all for it. You know, and I think the PC users aren't used to it as much as Mac users. Mac users are used to having things that are only on the PC because we're like, no, okay, well, it's only on the PC and we'll get a PC to do that. But it is, but PC users are not used to that, I think. And so I think that they're upset. But I think that I'm really glad to see that Zoom in general really focuses on taking advantage of every piece of hardware, whether it's Windows or Mac or others. You know, it is, they really, you know, we have customized development for each one of those. When I open up Teams, I still get, as I said before, a white window for no reason. It just pops open and just hangs there until I turn it off. It took me a while to figure out how to get rid of it. That's happening on my Mac, and it's been happening on my Mac for the last 3 years. I update my computer. I update Windows Teams. Like, this is horrible development. And this is not the kind of thing that you would expect from Zoom because they have teams that are focused on every platform and taking the full advantage of it. And I think that's a huge advantage. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, and here on the panel asks, what inexpensive hardware controller would you recommend to better switch with an ATEM Mini?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Probably the worst person to actually answer.
I know. I was going to tell you, no snark. Just answer the question.
Well, straight ahead. Okay. Well, I mean, inexpensive. The most inexpensive would be probably a Stream Deck. Stream Deck going into central control. He's going to be doing a demo here and showing us all about it here in the next hour. Definitely watch that because that's a great cost-effective way of doing it. And the next step would probably be a Skorhoy, which is one of my favorite controllers. Also, that's like $1,000. The next, probably lower below that, would be Central Control and the TIS controller, which is effectively a MIDI controller, but it's got really good buttons. I like it actually better than the Skorhoys, unless the Skorhoys have the NKK buttons. If you want to really go dumpster diving and you have a full warehouse of old controllers, you could use this. I found this one for $150. $150. This was an $8,000 controller when it was purchased. And it was $150 on eBay. And I said, click, yes, please. And this is the TriCaster controller. And it makes me feel so much better if I had to use an ATEM, using a TriCaster controller to do that. And so I take it, go into Core, or now Core, and then actually feed it out. This unit, you'll notice the back is actually open right now. It's going to have a small board computer in it by the end of the day, and actually be running central control inside this unit. So yeah, there's a lot of different options out there. It just depends kind of what inexpensive means.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, that was awesome, Jeff. So queuing up for the next second hour, reason to stick around. I never really knew what central control was at first, but now I'm a longtime customer. But the $40 one that you'll see later today, I mean, yesterday I was playing with it, and just even one of these little simple MIDI controllers can be used to program and switch an ATEM. I've seen Jeff on site switch with a Stream Deck, and I just had to laugh because his hands are so big, and trying to push those little Stream Deck buttons is hard for him. So he was just like, yeah, he was giving a little flack to the person who set it up, that he would have brought his own panel had he known, because it was a long show, and pushing those little buttons makes a big. It's a comfort level for the TD to have real buttons, physical buttons. And you'll see in central control that it's not just an ATEM. There's a lot of other things that you may use, like a vMix or a Behringer. device that you need some control with physical buttons rather than trying to grab a little button on an interface inside of Windows or your Mac.
Go, Jonas.
I would say, and this is not strictly hardware, is get Companion. And the reason why you want to get Companion when you use an ATEM is you can do a lot more things with it. And you can like program in things that might take you 5 buttons, or where you need to like switch between using the ATEM panel or for your ATEM Mini, the buttons and whatever else you have, like the ATEM software controller. But I found the really cheapest hardware that works with the ATEM natively, it's a keyboard. If you plug in a keyboard and open up ATEM software control, all the numbers suddenly become buttons that you can use to switch. And we have had shows where the TD, we lost all the hardware panels and the TD went in, hooked up a keyboard, and then you can actually switch. Don't know if it's enter or space bar, but if you press one of those, you do cut. So you can actually switch pretty okayly with a keyboard if we're looking for the inexpensive hardware controller.
Next question.
From the QR code, Harold Williams in Portsmouth, Virginia asks, I want to try vMix in the cloud this weekend. I understand that I need the right size AWS EC2 instance with the firewall set up correctly. What component in AWS acts as a network switch?
Go ahead, Jonas.
So AWS EC2 is a virtualized environment. So it is all VMs that you're using, except if you use Metal hardware server. You need a G4DN 2x large system, at least with Windows. One thing to keep in mind, if you want to do it this weekend, go over to AWS right now and request vCPUs. The biggest problem that we are seeing right now with people getting into cloud production is them forgetting that AWS doesn't just hand out instances with GPUs nowadays. There were during the great shortage that everybody in cloud who has been in it for like longer than 2 years can tell you, where you woke up in the middle of the night and worried about, can I get my instances up on the next morning? Since then, they have been far more restrictive with how many vCPUs they give you. And vCPUs basically just tells you how many instances, what size you can use. This network switch actually also is virtualized. So if you go into your VPC, your virtual private cloud, that's where the routing tables and subnets are set up. In there, if you're just getting started, don't worry about it for now. Deploy yourself an EC2 instance, do yourself a favor and not start with a stock Windows instance. Go into the Windows AWS Marketplace, use a nice CCV instance. Will still be annoying to set it up, will still take you a couple hours, but you'll learn a lot. But use nice CCV instead of just stock Windows and RDP, because then that already expels you for over 2 months of pain that we went through at the start. If you want to do more specific stuff with the network and the networking switch, that's where you really want to go into your VPC settings. And you can do routing tables there. You can change subnet behavior. You can change if it's a publicly routable subnet. So public subnet, all it means is there's a public IP address that can reach that instance. If you have a private subnet, it all comes through an app gateway. There's no public IP address for that specific instance. If you just use the VPC that AWS has there for you as default, everything is already set up. And we could take a whole year probably of office hours and just talk about AWS and AWS setup every single day. VPC setup is really complicated. Whenever you get to the point where you actually want to set up your own VPC, one tip that we always give our clients is don't set it up with the standard CIDR. Because one cool thing you can do in AWS is you can do something called VPC peering. And that allows you to connect 2 VPCs together. So that's how we, for example, for our productions, we use one VPC in the East and one VPC in the West Coast. And we don't want to traverse the internet if we send signals through that. We want to take advantage of the great backbone that AWS has already. So what you can do is you do a VPC peering, and then there's a connection between them. But You can't do that with the stock VPCs because they all have the same IP address CIDR. So take 5 minutes to half an hour to understand what IP address CIDRs are and make sure that all your VPCs are compatible between each other, because you can't change it after the fact. That's the other really important thing. Subnets, it might look like it's not important what subnet you choose. Subnets also define into what availability zone you deploy. So subnets might be called something, 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 but what is actually behind there is depending on what subnet you choose. You might deploy into US East 1A, 2A, 1B, whatever the case might be. So that is really important to keep that in mind, because there's bandwidth charges between those. So you would never want to send NDI across availability zones, but you could send it across subnets if it's in the same availability zone.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, that was a mouthful. And well said.
I was
Jonas.
like, what is Jeff going to add to this? I mean, let's try to keep it.
I'll keep it a little shorter.
Just add.
It was really a lot of great information, Jonas, and we love working with each other and ribbing each other. I would also see, Harold, that you're first off, welcome to the dark side. Second, Harold, thank you for putting your location in there. So you are located near the East Coast. Don't use that one. Go to what they call the other East Coast, Ohio, for whatever reason. Use that one, or use Oregon or California's data centers. They're less used in the G4 instances and G5s, G6s. We haven't had good luck with the G5s. There was no reason to go to G5s and G6s. G4s, G4DN, 2x at the minimum, but really a 4x is what you want to be to do real production testing. One thing Jonas did skip that I will add is I usually start off with building a VPC. If I'm in AWS, I'll build a VPC by starting off by building a discovery server. So an NDI discovery server, so you can use multiple machines pointed at that discovery service. That allows all the NDI machines to see each other. Otherwise, it gets a little funky sometimes, and it's just a lot more elegant to do that. So if you need help putting that up, it's a few lines of startup stuff that we can help you with. That's easy enough. Hit us up in Discord. I'm sure Jonas or myself can give you a script to run to do it. And the other thing I would say is check out GCP. Check out also Azure. There are other options besides AWS too.
Good guy.
And well covered by the guys there. If you want to do it this weekend, like they said, it's not going to happen because the request won't go through in time for you to be able to get enough availability for a G4 for a GP. You might be able to get a regular instance like a business C5 or something like that. If you just want to play with vMix in the cloud and you don't have to bring in sources that are super high quality at the moment, you can just fire up a shadow PC, and that's like $50 a month. It's always on, and you can just install vMix on it, and you can play with it, and you can put Tailscale or something like that on there, and you can bring stuff in, or you could use Video Ninja, and you can say add browser input, and you could just get going. But yeah, once you get into the deeper stuff, going over to AWS, I highly recommend using Jonas or Jeff. Jonas has scripts that'll spin up a whole environment in 18 minutes, and the time savings, that's weeks. So what's your time worth? I mean, it's lovely to learn all this stuff, but it does take time. And if you don't have 6 months to learn this, then I would just get one of these guys that are the expert.
And you might want to vote on questions. There's a lot of questions in here. We're not going to get to all of them. The next time we answer the questions from you, we will take the next time we do QR questions, just to manage your expectation, will be Monday, because we don't broadcast Saturday and Sunday. So Monday will be the next time we do QR code. So if you put those in now, you'll probably hear them then. But we'll take one pass at that and look at them. But I think that we're pretty full, so make sure to be voting there. If you do want to ask questions from the QR code any time of the day, any time of the week, you can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. Let's go ahead and jump into the next question.
John Nichols in Concord, California asks, Loopback update dropped yesterday. Are you using it? If so, does it fix the issues?
Go ahead, Jonas.
Sorry. I'm not personally using it, but a good friend of mine in the show, Chris Fenwick, is using it, and he had so many issues over the last little bit with these changes, but those appear to seem gone. If you look at all the different overhauls, it is quite good. It does seem to finally work again. Read through the changelog. There's a bunch of good things in there.
I usually put off upgrading, but I was so excited to get out from under ACE, which I hate, so when they put out a new version of this, I was like, oh, let's jump on that. And it was a disaster for me. I mean, I had to rebuild. I learned how to use Black Hole really well because I needed to figure something else out to make this all work. So I'm hoping that it's going to get fixed. I'll be testing it right after the show. I have a Black Hole solution, so now I don't need it for the stuff I'm doing right after this show. I record graymatter.show, so I'm able to kind of jump on that. But it was basically staticky content. Stuff wasn't even showing up in different places, and they think that they've fixed all of those issues. And so I very quickly updated it because I was like, what have I got to lose? I'm not using it right now. So hopefully it'll be fixed. But if you ask that next week, I'll probably have a better idea. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I was looking at the changelog. This is 2.4.1 is 2.40 is a very extensive update. And what's interesting, I did notice, is they've forked their releases now. So for some reason, it must be API related. But they're saying that they now have a separate version specific to macOS 14.5 and later. So if you have 14.4 and lower, they now have a different build. So there must be some fundamental changes in core audio.
I think Apple's been making a lot of changes, not always for the good, in the core audio, and everyone's been chasing this for a little while. There's in the new versions of the last version really destabilized Apple core audio in general, and so we're hoping that this all kind of starts to even out. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida asks, Artlist announced an AI voiceover subscription. How will AI voiceovers affect bespoke human ones?
Jesse?
Just to guess, I think within the next year, you'll see a lot of kind of the mid-level jobs being taken over by AI until either AI gets good enough that it clears that uncanny valley, or people just say we'd rather have humans read it. But the real benefit is that these voices will be able to transcribe documents that otherwise never would have made it to people's ears. So think of the millions of words in research papers, in medical documents, things like that are tremendously valuable, but not everybody has the time to read, but people would have the time to listen to. This is going to be a huge boon for information distribution.
Good, Jeff.
Coming from my sports background, I have the experience of meeting a company that, and I can't say who they are yet because I'm under NDA with them, but they are using an AI voiceover, and it's describing the play because their system analyzes the play and then allows it to be parsed out into different sections of stuff. And they train the AI how to do it and how to call it like a natural human would. And it was amazingly good. Amazingly good. It's coming. It's going to be here.
You go, Jonas.
And if you want to see for yourself, I'm just posting a link in the Mukana chat that has 2 voices from Artlist.io voiceover feature reading the office hours.global about website. So have a listen for yourself.
Yeah, it's I do think that folks at the very top, that you really want that performance, is still going to be a human for quite some time, but that's like the top 5%, 1%. Like everything else, I think is going to be, and there's just so much to do. When I look at magazines, I'm like, I want to listen to all of this. I don't want to read a long article. I will listen to long articles. I will not read them. I just won't sit down and read when I see The Atlantic or some of these other ones, I'm like, oh, that'd be a great article, except it's going to take me a long time on my phone to sit here and try to read that article. But I could walk around and listen to it. It's just that they haven't invested in doing that. There's a couple of reasons they haven't invested. Advertising becomes a real problem because advertising is it has a huge impact on the listener in a way that it doesn't have in print. And the problem that they're having is if you move text to audio, how do you make money at it? And that's why subscription services are working related to that. We may just end up with a lot of subscription walls that have this all actually pencil out. Next question.
Next question is from Michael in Toronto. This is from the QR code. I'm a podcast producer and have been using Riverside for a while. I love it for its ISO audio recording and video storage, but it's been quite taxing on my podcasters and guests with their variety of PC Mac specs. Is ZoomISO a better alternative?
Jonas?
Zoom in general has been what we've been using, and it has been a better alternative to most of those in-browser solutions. One thing to keep in mind is that you're getting with Riverside right now is double-end recording that you won't get with Zoom right now. I would say you don't even, if you're not doing it live, you might not even need ZoomISO. You might just, all you need might be a Zoom license and then enable cloud recording where you can also get isolated audio feeds directly for you to import. So that might be a really nice solution for you. In general, we have found not only the quality and the hardware requirements to be better with Zoom, but also the conversation is better. It's a familiar interface. There is less weirdness. Sometimes it even helps that it looks less than a show in the normal interface, right? Like two people are just sitting in a Zoom meeting and having a conversation sometimes produces better content as well because they're more relaxed. So I would look at that. I think Zoom is a great option for that. They really have high quality audio options now, and especially with varying specs. And if you don't know a lot about networks and all that of the talents, Zoom is a great solution. Like Zoom has really built a nice product for, it'll probably work anywhere.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, those great suggestions there. And if you are looking at ZoomISO, presumably you are on a Mac. So another couple of other great options are Ecamm and both Mimo Live as well. Those are highly optimized. In fairness to Riverside, I've tested a lot of these WebRTC type web browser products, and they all have a much higher tax on the CPU in general. So going with some kind of bespoke application that is highly optimized to the graphics card, those always seem to work better.
Next question.
Next question's from the QR code. This is Balaji in Bangalore, India. Hi, I have understood the basics of subnetting theory, but want to do it practically. Can we do this with home router? Can anyone just give a basic demo on how to do it and how these subnets can communicate if we create multiple subnets?
Home router is a big word. So that's usually where most of us start to go, well, I don't know how much you can do. It really depends on the router itself and what you need to do with it at home. So a lot of the home routers are pretty limited in what you can get done. Go ahead, Jonas.
I would probably also say I think you might be messing up VLAN versus subnet. I don't think there's that much to gain from using different subnets in this case. Most routers, if you set different subnets, will actually block traffic between them. And most routers actually also have a DHCP server, which have a specific subnet mask that will block traffic from outside that. That being said, if you want to experiment with subnets, grab yourself as many devices as you want, grab yourself a dumb switch, and you can set everything manually, all the subnets manually, and get it communicating that way. You will run into all the issues that between subnets, it can't talk to each other and all that, but that's how you can test it.
I think the biggest thing to understand is making sure that everything's on the same subnet. I think that's usually getting in there, because that subnet is it's the house that you're in, to find your device. And if you put something in another house, you're not going to find it there. Next question.
Next question is from the QR code. Kern in Maine asking, is there a resource for layouts or blueprints for live streaming setups? There are a million YouTube tutorials and, of course, office hours, but looking for a graphic of hardware layouts.
There aren't. A lot of us build them. I think a lot of us are sensitive at putting them up. And I think that part of it, I don't think that it's that much a secret. Part of it is just having people pick at it. But I think that doing something that we should think about maybe putting up some ideas on some of those, maybe different ones too. Like here's an NDI workflow, here's an SDI workflow, here's an HDMI workflow of like how to build a basic setup. I think could be really useful. So it's a really good suggestion. Let's think about how we can support you on that. But I don't know of any resources that are out there right now on the internets. Next question.
Next question is from the QR code, Marielle Jusha Miera and Wablo asking, how has the panel seen the LiveX encoder comparison?
Go ahead, Jonas.
Yes, I think they do a great job, actually. It's a YouTube video. They tested a Magewell encoder and 2 other encoders with it. Osprey Talon, the one that we're using for the show, being one of them. And it is really interesting. They built a test rig where they test multiple things. They let you view all the encodes yourself on YouTube, so you can see what you actually like best. And then they help you kind of look at this. Here is where you see a little color bending here. Here's where you see stair stepping. What I'll say is I have been surprised with how good the Magewell Ultra encode did in that test. Had some issues with the fast motion, but it did really well with confetti. It was also really interesting to see the Osprey Talon not adhere to bitrate limitations and just send you to 21 mbits of data and produce a really beautiful picture of the confetti. But yeah, so it's worth a look at that. And another one, since we are mentioning the LiveX encoder shootouts, also look at the one that they did with ZoomISO. It's really interesting to see their take on remote contribution and how good Zoom's codec really is. Because I think a lot of us don't understand how much you can just do within Zoom and how great that picture has become.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas asks, how do you prepare for a location podcast that you have to travel to by train, 2 suitcases and a backpack in terms of equipment, prep, packing, inventorying, etc., with only 2 days to get it all together?
Go, Jason.
Draw out your equipment using H2R gear. In the middle of a room, put a table, rebuild that entire rig on that table, put a piece of tape around that table, and anything that goes on the table gets packed. Anything that isn't is gone, and test it before you put it down.
Yeah, it's hard to fit those into a smaller kit, but I definitely, one thing that people do miss oftentimes in these situations is to pre-build. I pre-build almost everything, unless we've got a lot of rental equipment coming in. If I have especially a small kit, I want to pre-build everything. And I come from film where we're used to doing that with the cameras, building up the cameras the day before, making sure that everything is exactly the way we want it, and then putting them all back to where we're going to bring them out. Just note that you want to bring extras of things, extra mics, extra cables, extra, usually what we have is in a small kit like yours, we'll have a Crikey bag. We call it a Crikey bag. As they get bigger, we have a Crikey 1510. As it gets bigger, we have a Crikey 1650. And for our largest events, we have a road case that is all Crikey. These are all things that don't have a mission. It's important that you don't even have an assumption that they have a mission when you get started. So the idea is they have no mission. Like there is, we'll have in our larger kits, we'll have 10 or 12 decimators just sitting there with no mission. We're not thinking, we're going to put them in somewhere. If we're going to do that, we're going to put it in the kit that it belongs in. So you want to have a little extra bag of lots of little extras that you may need in there to make sure that when things go wrong, you have somewhere to go. I mean, I think that's the main thing. But definitely build your kit completely up. Test it to make sure that all the pieces are working in the flow that you have. Oftentimes, if I have to set up quickly when I get to the other side, I'm going to name all my cables, so I'm going to say, this is going in here, this is going in there. I've got an outlet, especially for something small, because a lot of times if you've got time to set up, you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. But a lot of times I come in and I've got 20 minutes or 30 minutes to set up for a podcast recording. And I'm going to come in there and I want to be able to just click things together at memory speed. If it's a kit you use all the time, it's not a problem. And a lot of times if you have a small kit like this, a lot of times mine stays pre-packed. So I can grab onto two cases, walk out, set down and have a production. And usually I have a couple kits like that. So it just really depends on how you deal with that. We've got Joe to Max coming up here in just a minute or less than a minute here. Just a quick reminder that Saturday and Sunday, Saturday's an hour of Q Q&A, and Sunday is the more introspection. So if you have questions about office hours, concerns about office hours, ideas for office hours, the best time to ask those is on Sunday. And another reminder that, of course, we do this all from your support. So you can go to officehours.global/donate. Thank you.